It's good to see you all here. My name is John Abarca. I'm your resident director of Pearce. I actually belong from Geneva, so you're going to see all the way back to 2013, 2016. And that's where today's story is going to start. I graduated from Geneva in 2016 with a degree in student ministry. But when I graduated, in a time that had been filled with a lot of joy and anticipation for what was to come, found myself instead in a space where I was actually falling very quickly away from God and into a lot of feelings of despair. And that was through bad luck with some concussions, some difficulties with family life, and some poor decision making on my part. So that's where I'm going to pick up the story today. In the summer of 2016, I had actually accepted a position to work with the CCO in Pittsburgh, and instead found myself going back home to Rochester, New York. And when I went home to Rochester, New York, I remember specifically one time I was kind of talking with God, and I felt like I finally hit this moment where I was just being honest with him, and I was like, I am done living for you right now. I feel like I've been trying to do this for the last 6 years or so. I've tried to stand by you, I've tried to live for you, and all I find myself in is just sadness, depression, and all of my dreams falling away from me. And so I'm just going to do me. And God, in his mercy, I think he knew what I was going to do. And I remember hearing, not in his audible voice, although that would have been incredible, I remember just getting the sentiment from God of like, I know you're going to do what you're going to do, but you still have to go to church on Sunday. And you still have to kind of engage with some of the people I'm going to send your way. And I said, fine, okay, whatever. I'm going to do me. And so I did. And I started my summer staying out as long as I could, drinking as much as I possibly could, and doing whatever I could with any girls I found coming my way. And over the beginning of that summer, as I really just started living for myself, I still found myself showing up on Sundays, and sometimes I'd hear, a little bit of remorse. I'd hear the word of God. I'd be worshiping. I'd be wondering what I was doing with my life, and I kind of started convincing myself of this idea that I was just going through a phase, and this wasn't really me, but I just needed to get this out of my system. And so I started saying, whenever people would kind of call me out for what I was doing, like, it's not me. It's just a time. And so I would live that way, but still found myself meeting with my old youth pastor, with some friends, and with a priest at my father's church that he put me in contact with. And as much as I tried to run away from God, I kept noticing that I was learning new things about him all the time. I was learning more about prayer. I was learning more about his love. I was learning more about what it really means to be a follower of him. But I wasn't living that out, and I just kept kind of doing me until one time I was talking with someone, and they looked at me one night and they asked me, John, you share this story about having, gone to school for student ministry. You talk about wanting to be in the church someday, and yet obviously I've been hanging out with you and I see the way you're living. Like, what's the deal? Is this real, or is this all just kind of an act? And I didn't answer them in that moment. I just kind of, let the night go as it did, and woke up the next day with, the headache that usually came. And as I started thinking about what was next, I remembered the question from the night before, and I had to look myself in the mirror and I had to say, is this who I am? And I was kind of faced with the realization that you can only say something's a phase for so long until you have to start realizing that what you're doing is becoming who you are. And in this moment, I recognized that as I was running away from God, he had still been weaving a story. He had still been weaving opportunities. He had still been teaching me. And so I believe truly it was God's Spirit in me that had been keeping me showing up on Sundays and keeping me in community with some people. And I finally had the courage to open up his word again. And I opened up to a book that I'd actually read for the first time here at Geneva in a wisdom literature class. It was the book of Ecclesiastes. If you're familiar with the book, it's not exactly the most hopeful book on the front end. But the words brought me more peace and joy than I could have anticipated when I opened it. I read Ecclesiastes chapter 1. It was just the second verse. It says, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And I remember in that moment just kind of pausing, because I finally understood what the author was talking about. If you're unfamiliar, the teacher basically goes through all the things that man can enjoy in this world, and all the good and all the bad, and the theory is that to experience everything is meaningless. The only thing that matters is anything that has to do with God and doing his will. And as I woke up every morning, head pounding, but just getting ready to do the same thing over and over again, I felt that meaninglessness. I felt the emptiness, and I felt God saying, hey son, I'm still here. I still want you. I offer you not just a meaningful life, but the fullest life. And so I kept reading Ecclesiastes, I kept going to church, and I started hanging out more with the people at my church and less with the people I was hanging out with in the evenings. And over time, it wasn't just this one moment where I cried and came back, was like, oh God, you're here. But I found myself, I probably opened up Ecclesiastes in August. I found myself in late or mid-October singing a song in worship that declared boldly, God, you can do whatever you want with my life. It's yours. I'm submitted fully to you. I go where you call me. And it was really cool because it dawned on me I meant what I was singing again. And I was so thankful because no matter how hard I tried, and no matter how hard I have tried, God in his grace always brings me back to him. And I guess I just want you guys to hear today, I don't know many of you. I'm excited to get to know a lot of you. I'm finally remembering some of my Pearce guys' names. But no matter how hard you try to run away, all it takes is one night, one moment opening his word, one conversation with someone, for God to just come back in and say, hey, I love you. I care about you. No matter how many times you try to run away from him, he is never going to stop chasing after you. He is never going to stop pursuing you. And no matter what you have done, his arms are wide open. And it is incredible and beautiful what he can do with your life and the fullness he can bring to your life if you follow him. So that's my story. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.